I'm the out-of-body atheist, and this video is gonna kind of suck to make because what I want to talk about is my personal deconstruction, how I went from being a God-believing person to an atheist. In broad strokes, this is going to start with me being LDS or a Mormon. It's going to progress through New Age spiritualism, and we're going to wind up after a brief detour into philosobro land. We're going to wind up as an atheist. So it's kind of the roadmap. All right, I'm talking about personal experience, and that means that everything I say is going to be the truth, but not everything I say is necessarily going to correspond to reality. Because part of my deconstruction was really realizing how imperfect our memories are, and how every time we think about something, we kind of alter our memories to fit whatever our worldview or narrative happens to be. So I'm going to accurately report what I remember, but what I remember isn't necessarily accurate. And I think that's something that's really hard to live with. We want to believe that our experiences of the world are just imprinted indelibly in our mind. We don't want to confront the fact that that person that we used to be is dying a lot more literally throughout our life than we thought. We're dying all the time. Who we have been is erased and ceases to be before we're even physically dead. It's Zen if you can make it that way. It's a little bit less weird if you make it Zen. Right, so my deconstruction started when I was not even yet officially LDS. I was a child, and this part is apocryphal. This goes before my memories. I'm told about this by my parents. My parents used to read to me when I was very young from the Bible and the Book of Mormon, because they naively believed that these books were the Word of God, or at least inspired of God, and that they would not be harmful for a little child, because why would God do that to a little boy? There's a lot of stuff in the Bible and the Book of Mormon that is really, really awful. In both books, you've got your genocides, you've got massive wars, people killing each other. Notably, you've got a beheading in the Book of Mormon, and it's a beheading of somebody who isn't even conscious. It's a completely avoidable murder that is directly commanded by God. There's a lot of shit in there that's just, it's bad. So when my sweet, fully believing, idealistic parents read to me from the Bible and the Book of Mormon, it gave me terrible nightmares. Because I dreamed about these battles and these murders and these genocides and awful things that are in those books if you will read them. And I wasn't even old enough to deal with that. And I would wake up in the middle of the night and wake my parents up yelling at God to stop doing those things, is what I'm told. So my deconstruction began before I even believed. But I did believe. I took my membership in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints very seriously. I went to church every Sunday with my parents. I would go to the kiddie Sunday school, and I would be engaged, and I would ask questions. And I sincerely believed, because why would my parents lie to me about something that important? Something like the overall fate of my eternal soul. I mean, that's a big deal. And I took it very seriously. And that's the next point where I ran into trouble. When I was going to Sunday school, Before I was even 8, and 8 years old is the age where you are baptized in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm really excited to get to a point where we're allowed to call them Mormons again, because it's so much easier to say. So if I sound like I'm making fun of their extended name a little bit, I am. It's stupid to make us say all those words and call us disrespectful if we don't. So before I was even 8, which is the age of baptism, I would have questions, like serious questions. And I took it very seriously, and my Sunday school teacher would do a really shit job answering my questions, because Sunday school teachers for the under 8 kids really don't have to know very much of the doctrine or even have an understanding of it. They're just called to the position by the bishop. A calling is when the bishop supposedly is inspired by God to give a job to a member of the church to do. And all of the important positions in the church are callings. The bishop himself is called. Whichever way you take that, the path is clear. It's time to go. Luckily, I had really wonderful, sincere, loving parents who continued to accept me even though I was essentially an 8-year-old apostate. And instead of saying, "You're no son of mine unless you go to church," they said, "We have these friends in other faiths. Why don't you go to church with them as well?" And the lesson I learned going to other churches is that Sunday school teacher was the reason I left the Mormon church, because he sucked so bad. And somebody's going to come at me in the comments, "Well, your church hurt isn't a good reason to not believe." Actually, it is. It is, because if you take the LDS doctrine seriously, and these callings are truly inspired of God, then God put this abusive idiot in charge of a bunch of kids. And what does that tell us about that God? So either the doctrine is true and I shouldn't believe in the church because the doctrine takes us to a very stupid and uncomfortable place, or the doctrine is not true, in which case I should not believe in the church. Whichever way you take that, the path is clear. It's time to go. Luckily, I had really wonderful, sincere, loving parents who continued to accept me even though I was essentially an 8-year-old apostate. And instead of saying, "You're no son of mine unless you go to church," they said, "We have these friends in other faiths. Why don't you go to church with them as well?" The lesson I learned going to other churches is that if you don't grow up in a church, it's freaking weird. And I think that's a really important lesson. You cannot overemphasize the fact that every church is freaking weird to an outsider. And that is actually an important lesson towards further deconstruction. So after all of these sincere attempts to find a church, kind of ironically mirroring parts of the Joseph Smith story, if we're to be honest, although there are a couple of different versions of the Joseph Smith story in that regard, and they contradict each other, which, I mean, really, if the guy himself is telling contradicting stories about the church he started and his personal role in it, that's another reason to maybe not believe. Well, during all that, my mom actually left the LDS church, and she got into New Age spiritualism. And because I wasn't doing anything and I was still having vaguely spiritual feelings, I grew up having church experiences. I needed something, I thought. I went along with her. We joined a group called Aho Metakue Oesun, which is a Lakota phrase meaning roughly, I've got something in my eye, it's terrible, for all my relations. Oh, it was very sweet, but I have to say that for all that everyone participating in this group was very sincere and loving, you can't get a bunch of white people trying to get into Native American spiritual practices without stuff getting a little bit weird and colonial. And looking back, kind of did. But I went through that, and I still love my Aho family. Hi, Aho family, if you're watching this. Yeah, I'm a cranky old atheist now. It's not your fault. You did your best. I mean, that was like the most at home I felt. I also got into palmistry and crystal healing and color mat. I got into everything. Then came a time when my mom had enrolled in a Reiki healing course to become a certified Reiki healer, and scheduling conflict arose. She'd already paid for the class. She said, "Hey, do you want to go?" And I said, "Hell yeah, spiritual knowledge, sign me up." So as a young teenager, I went to this Reiki healing class. And just a brief overview, Reiki is kind of like laying on your hands to heal, but you don't even touch them. No touching. I'm not on your side of the car. I'm not touching you. I'm just healing you. We're not touching. And during the class, let's call it a class. It was a class. We practice, how you rub your hands together and you hold them apart, and then you feel the energy between your hands, for which there is a perfectly logical neurological explanation. And then we practiced healing each other, and there was aura photography and a bunch of stuff, and more of it was transparently bullshit as I went through the class. And by the end of the class, I was having some serious doubts about New Age spirituality. I also had a Reiki certification. So I am a certified Reiki healer. I believe it's bullshit, but if you want to give me money, I will Reiki you. It's bullshit, but I'll do it. If you're into that shit, I can do it. It's a certification. I got a little bit older. I started spending time with troubled teens out on the streets, and being a troubled teen myself, I was dealing with depression. I was hanging out with homeless kids and runaways. And I'm bringing this up because I noticed that a lot of these homeless kids had something in common, and that is that they either didn't share their parents' religion or they were gay, and because of that, they'd been kicked out of their home or made to feel so awful in their home that they felt like they had to leave it. And I feel like that is a component of my deconstruction, because what kind of God would move parents to cut off the love to their children just because of who their children are? Not a good God. A really bullshit God. So that's when I really started kind of getting angry. I was not angry up until the point where I really started to see that these beliefs people were holding are doing tangible harm in the world, are ripping families apart and depriving young people of loving environments to grow up in. When I started to see that, yeah, I started getting angry. I continued along kind of a blandly spiritualist pathway. I didn't really believe in gods anymore, but I kind of did. I didn't have like a belief system around it. It was kind of like there may be gods, and it seems to me, because rituals don't always work, perhaps the gods are not motivated by any strong feelings. Perhaps the gods are just these jaded assholes who, if we entertain them the right way at the right time, might grant us a boon. Which honestly makes the most sense if you look at the world and the way it works. You can't have a good God. and a world that looks like this. And I was kind of coming around to the idea that, okay, maybe there are gods and they're kind of assholes. And if I put on a good play for them, they'll do things for me. Then one day in my early 20s, I was in a bookstore. And I don't know why, but there was this absolutely thick tome that just kind of caught my eye and captivated my attention. And when I read the title, Philosophy in the Flesh, The Embodied Mind and Its Challenge to Western Thought, and there was just something about the size of the book and the title. It made me feel like if I could read a book like that, I would be more of a someone. I would be a deep thinker, maybe. Let's give it a try. So I bought the book. The whole point of the book is using philosophy and linguistics to argue that we are not dualist systems. We're not a mind or a soul in a body. We are a body with a mind. And the mind and the body are one. And it does that through kind of explorations of neurophysiology and how memories work and all sorts of, just a lot. There was a lot there. It's a thick book. In the back of the book, there were recommended readings. So each of those could take you a little bit deeper down the rabbit hole, like into philosophy or into linguistics or into neurophysiology, just basically cognitive science. This was cognitive science. And I was hooked. And this was back before I had regular access to the internet. So I was doing a lot of interlibrary loans. I was getting a lot of funny looks from the librarian because who gets these books? What am I doing with these books? I think one of the books was simply called The Amygdala. It was just a big old thick, like 800-page book about the amygdala, part of the brain, kind of close-ish to the brainstem that's no larger than a walnut. And I mean, I read the book and I was very proud of my maybe 10% comprehension of what I was reading. It's not an easy book. There's a lot of biochemistry in there, and I was a high school dropout at the time. At some point, reading through all of these books and just exploring the idea of the mind and body as one thing and not a dualistic thing, I realized I was an atheist. Dualism was no longer tenable, therefore I don't have a soul. Nobody has a soul. Souls don't make sense anymore, and if not souls, why gods? And I said, oh shit, I'm an atheist. And that really is the whole trip. I became kind of a wannabe philosobro. Eventually, I did kind of grow out of my philosobro angry atheist phase. I think both of them can be helpful. I think both of them are intolerable. And if that's you, I love you anyway, man. I'm excited for you to come out the other side. But I also think it's reasonable. It's reasonable to be an angry atheist because when you first realize all of this harm that is being done in the world in the name of love, it's hard not to be angry. Anger is justified. And if you're a philosobro, I understand you too, man. Just be careful. There is a tendency in philosobro circles to use the jargon to obfuscate and to try to make your opponent look or feel stupid instead of for what jargon is for, which is to just condense information down into a handy little packet instead of taking several paragraphs to convey. So if you have a high jargon density and you're talking to a non-philosopher, I do have some advice for you, and that advice is cut it out. you're being an asshole. I am still a little bit mad at the Mormon Church. What I'm mad at the LDS Church for is their constant attacks on LGBTQ rights. It's okay if you want your church to be bigoted. I mean, it's not okay, but you do you, sack of shit. But it's not okay at all for you to use your church's massive resources that come from taking 10% of the income from incredibly poor people sometimes and just spend millions of dollars fighting against gay equality in our society. That's really sick. It's really gross. And I'm mad at the LDS Church for that. I'm mad at the LDS Church for continuing to create an atmosphere where parents can feel justified in treating their gay kids like shit and possibly kicking them out, or being such assholes that their kids feel like they have no choice but to run away. That's not a loving church. I feel like the LDS Church is a good fit if you're a good fit. And if you're not a good fit, even a little bit, it can make your life hell, and that's not okay. I also want to close by talking about how this isn't the story of how I deconstructed, it's the story of my deconstruction so far. I am still deconstructing. Deconstruction doesn't end with atheism, because along the way, not just from religion, but also from popular culture, we pick up a lot of other bullshit that we still need to deconstruct from. I mean, just about every 80s and 90s comedy, if you watch it, there's a little bit of misogyny snuck in there, almost as if, the ghost of Harvey Weinstein, that guy was in there being like, I'm going to make you think like me. So even though I have this intellectual understanding in the equality of men and women and transgender people and everyone, I am also aware that there's that little guy in my gut who's still kind of an asshole. As long as we understand that it's not right and we're actually working on it, we should still be able to feel like good people, because we don't have control of what we believe. I didn't get to choose to be an atheist, and I was unable to choose not to be an atheist later on when I really wanted to. I don't get to choose what that asshole in my limbic system wants to cling to in terms of misogyny and other bigotry. All I can do is practice acting like a decent person, knowing that eventually I'm going to wear that bastard down. I'm going to wear him down. And when I do, I'll be a better person. So deconstruction is forever. We deconstruct until we die. We're always going to pick up more bullshit, and only through constant introspection and constantly testing what we believe and why, and really looking at the results of what we've taken in and what they're likely to do, those ideas, to the world, only if we continuously work through that until we're no longer able to, can we, I think, really be good people. And I think there's a notable atheist that I can point to as one of the hazards of thinking that you're done deconstructing just because you're an atheist. Hi, Richard Dawkins. Richard Dawkins is an atheist and a biologist, two things that you'd think I'd agree with. But because he's also still a cultural Christian, and he uses that as an excuse to be an anti-trans bigot in spite of the massive piles of scientific evidence against his bigotry. Thank you, Richard Dawkins, for being a wonderful example of why you should never stop deconstructing. And I understand that it gets exhausting. And you just want to stop doing that hard work. And you just want to stop feeling uncomfortable. But don't be like Dawkins. That's all I'm saying. I've been the out-of-body atheist. Enjoy your journey. I hope you wind up somewhere good. Thanks for hanging on to the end. Consider liking and subscribing and all that shit. See ya.